Good day. I am Magau Londani, the Deputy Chairperson of Faculty of Management, Commerce and Law at the University of Venda. I studied my LLB here at the University of Venda from 2020 until 2023, and this year I am doing my Master's LLM in Human Rights Law here at the University of Venda. I'm a group member of the Univen Human Rights Law Defenders Group. We are three, and I will introduce the other names. I'll start by giving the title of what we are dealing with at the Human Rights Law Defenders at the University of Venda. We are dealing with confronting gender-based violence because we want to understand why is it that gender-based violence still persists, although we have all these laws that we have in the country, but still it still continues, and we want to find solutions to this problem. I will introduce my other colleagues, Mr. Ramabaga Truso and Ms. Dibakwane Sendra. I will come now to the introduction. When you speak about gender-based violence, it's something that you all know. We have all heard about it and we all know about it. And what I want, so you all know what is gender-based violence, but it is a global pandemic. It is more serious than we all think because it has an impact on women and children, especially girls. Yes, others can argue that it also affects males. It does at some points, but using the statistics in the world globally, it is affecting women. I will just introduce the legal framework. We have the international law, and in terms of the international law, we have the United Nations. Under the United Nations, it recognizes gender-based violence obviously as a violation of human rights. We have got instruments that we use, such as Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, and other instruments that we can use as the covenants. In terms of when we go now regionally in Africa, we also have sources, we also have instruments that are there to combat this virus or to combat gender-based violence. We have the African Union, which has adopted few instruments that we can use. We have got the African Charter on Human Rights, on Women and People's Rights, on the rights of women in Africa. We have got the Maputo Protocol that seeks obviously to fight gender inequality and abuse of women. And we also have constitutions in other countries that are dealing with these issues domestically. In our country, we have the constitution and legislations. We have got legislation such as the Sexual Offences Act, such as the constitution is also there, and we also have the Domestic Violence Act, which is there to combat these acts. I will now go to the factors that would influence gender-based violence or that influence gender-based violence in our country and globally. I will start with cultural and traditional practices. Remember, culture has got an impact, a huge impact on how you act as a person. So at some points, people act based on their traditions, based on their cultures. We know as black people in our cultures, we have beliefs where some of the times women are not allowed to do certain things. A man is the head of the family and all that. So those things have got a role to play on gender-based violence, and these are some of the factors that influence gender-based violence. We have also social norms, and we should not forget economic factors, because poverty and lack of education, it also increase the vulnerability to gender-based violence. The question is, how does gender-based violence violate human rights? As I said, it is more than how you can think of. Gender-based violence should be seen as a violation of human rights. There is an intersection between human rights and gender-based violence, and we should understand the legal and the moral imperatives of such. Gender-based violence, obviously, it affects the right to life, liberty, security of the person, because at some points people are killed, they get to be abused, assaulted, and all that. And it will also go to infringe some of the rights, such as right to dignity, equality, and non-discrimination, because most of these people are being discriminated based on their genders. There is a question why is it that we should fight gender-based violence? What is the importance of fighting gender-based violence? We should address this question in the sense of the importance of protecting human rights. Human rights, as we know, these are some of them, they are non-derogable rights. So gender-based violence violates some of those non-derogable rights. I can say that it is essential to ensure that people enjoy human rights at all costs, and the states obviously should try to protect these rights. The fight against gender-based violence is crucial because we want to achieve gender equality and social justice, not just in South Africa but internationally. How can you identify perpetrators? This is very important. There are certain things that you can see from a person, maybe you're in a relationship or in the society. How can you identify that this person can be a perpetrator? You can firstly look at controlling behavior. People who tell you what to do and what not to do, they order you around. Such kind of a person is a potential perpetrator. You can also look at emotional manipulation. There are people who try to make their problems yours. Maybe you're in a relationship or in a society and you meet such people. These are potential perpetrators of gender-based violence. Some of the times, people will scream at you, they'll show you physical violence, they will give you threats, and you should also know that this person might be a perpetrator of gender-based violence, and you should try to move away from such people. You can also look at isolation from friends and family. People who try to live alone and they believe that they can stand alone and do everything on their own. It is also a sign of being a perpetrator of gender-based violence. Now, in the world and also in the Republic of South Africa, most of these issues of most of these cases are not reported because of several reasons that some of them have already highlighted. For example, because of culture, because people will believe that no, the families will sit and try to engage on these issues. We should also recognize fear of retaliation and retribution, because these people, a person who is being abused physically, it means that they're physically weak, and they will fear that maybe they're going to be abused going forward, or they're going to be retaliated. Obviously, they do feel low, and they also have shame and stigma because of this gender-based violence that they're being subjected to. And at some points, they end up not trusting those around them, and also not trusting, most importantly, the legal system and the law enforcement. We know that our communities and our societies are very judgmental, and this means that fear of being judged or being blamed can also play a role in non-reporting of these cases. There are consequences of gender-based violence that colleagues we should not forget. For example, we should not forget the physical and emotional harm to victims. We should not forget how it affects their future, because as a girl child, if it's happening at school, it also affects how you perform academically. It's very important that you should know that you can be arrested and be imprisoned as a perpetrator because of gender-based violence, because globally the international human rights law is trying by all means to fight gender-based violence. There are certain strategies that we can use to fight gender-based violence that I'm going to highlight now. Number one is what we are doing now to try and educate and have awareness campaign, so that we educate people about gender-based violence, so that they don't just see it as a social issue but also as a human rights issue, using human rights lens. They should also look at it in human rights law lens or human rights law perspective. We should also try to have community engagement and outreach programs where you are, to try and teach people who still believe maybe in culture, traditions, that some of them would lead to these acts. We should try by all means to support victims of these crimes. We should try to give support and to counsel them and to give them legal assistance. In conclusion, I can say it is important to call for action against gender-based violence, and you should not say it cannot happen to me, because it can happen to everyone. It might be happening to somebody you know, but they will act strong at all times. So this is where I call for collective efforts to try and combat gender-based violence, because gender-based violence on its own, it should be stopped not tomorrow but today, and you have the powers in your hands to make sure that people around you are educated and they know the effects, they know the impacts, they know how is it that they can fight gender-based violence. I will finish by saying that the fight against gender-based violence, it does not only require you and I, but the whole collective, the whole society, the whole community. And it also requires the governments, civil society, and individuals to make sure that we fight gender-based violence. I thank you.